Good morning, members, and welcome to this first meeting of the Tackling Poverty, Inequalities and Housing Subcommittee. This committee has an important role to play, giving the members the opportunity to be involved in discussing, scrutinising and shaping the range of work across the Council which tackles poverty and inequalities and gives a unique opportunity to ensure that our work continues to be joined up and a collaborative process across the whole Council, and making a big difference and impact to communities and individuals. It is a privilege to be the chairman of this committee, but it comes with serious responsibilities because we face challenges, and one of the probably the most important issue in Dumfries and Galloway and throughout the country, tackling poverty. Faces challenges, so it's important that we work together to make sure that the resources are available to us are used properly and efficiently, and that we can really tackle issues which affect the people of Dumfries and Galloway. This meeting has been live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council website. Remote participants are asked to follow the good practice guidance. I won't go through that item as that good guidance, but unless people online want me to do that, but because they're well aware of how to conduct the proceedings. So the first item on the agenda is Sedarian apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. I would like to approve members' remote participation and hand over to Claire.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I've currently got 14 members present this morning, 9 members on Teams, 5 in the hall, and 1 member currently not present, being Councillor Johnston. The members present on Teams are Councillors Blake, Crothers, Davis, Drysdale, Ferguson, Lowe, McFarlane, Marshall and Scobie. Everybody else in the hall. Thank you.
I think Councillor Johnston's an apology because he's on leave.
Next item is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection they wish to make? I don't see any declarations. We'll move on to item 3. Through Young Eyes. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just looking for maybe a place to come in. It's just in relation to your open statement, you mentioned about this is an important committee, which it is, and you mentioned tackling poverty and inequalities. Obviously, housing is a very important aspect of that, particularly homelessness, etc. But I just wondered, for this first meeting, why there was there's no housing papers on this first meeting.
I'll ask the officials to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Marshall completely agree that housing homelessness is a significant agenda item, and it will be one that's fully featured in a future committee. What we've tried to do today is keep a theme in relation to child poverty, and we've got an excellent presentation coming up and some papers particularly around that. We do have a forward plan in draft that we will share with members moving forward, and we'll give you the opportunity to see what's coming up in the coming meetings. We're also currently doing the action plan following the motion at full council earlier in the year, and that work's currently ongoing. We'll be in a position to be presented at the next meeting, so we should see the work coming forward then. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Thanks, Stephen. Through Young Eyes, in each of these committees going ahead, we have the opportunity to receive a presentation from an external group to our organisation to hear about their work to tackle poverty and inequalities. Today will be the first of these presentations, and as the whole agenda is focused on children and young people, we invited a group of young people who have recently produced a film that tells us about the experience of child poverty through the lens of young people themselves. I'm delighted to say that we've got some of the young people along today to show the film and to present to us on the key findings of Through Young Eyes. So I'd like to ask for the agreement of members to accept the recommendation number 1, which will receive a presentation from young people and then we can hand over to the young people to take us through the presentation and show us the film. We will then cover the rest of the recommendations at the end of the item and in the usual fashion. Are we happy to agree to the presentation? Yeah. Agreed? Well, thank you very much. So I'll hand you over to our youth squad, and we'll listen, see their interesting
Thanks, Chair. I'm not so young, as you can see, but I'll hand over to the young people in a second just to introduce this item as being a film produced by young people supported by our Youth Work service, which was designed to bring a perspective on child poverty through the eyes of children and young people themselves, as quite often child poverty is seen through the lens of officers or decision makers or adults involved in community work across our region. So really delighted to have 3 young people from across Dumfries and Galloway with us today who were part of that steering group, and we're going to watch the short film that starts the presentation, and then we'll hand over to the young people for their presentation input, and then they're happy to also take some questions and as well as myself if required, but certainly the young people will take us through the next short part, and we'll go ahead with the video now if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Mark.
What poverty means to me.
What poverty means to us.
When you don't have enough money.
Lack of possessions and things you need to survive, like food and electric.
Low income living on the breadline.
Low self-esteem, poor mental health.
This can lead to crime, theft, antisocial behaviour.
Low social status, people looking down on you because you don't have the best of stuff.
Can lead to crime, theft and antisocial behaviour. Run-down houses, no heating.
Damp.
Not having money to do things that your friends are doing.
Not being able to afford further education.
Through Young Eyes has been produced by young people to provide a unique insight into the effects of poverty on children and young people in our region.
Through this film, we hope to help others see and understand the experiences of children and young people in poverty.
There is a huge effort across Dumfries and Galloway to tackle and eradicate poverty, and we know there are already good support networks in place through local services and organisations. However, the cost of living is continuing to rise to unthinkable levels and putting huge pressure on families who are already struggling to stay afloat.
Through Young Eyes doesn't provide the solutions, rather a plea to listen to hear and reflect on children and young people's concerns, and to consider what more could be done to give them a better life and the childhood they deserve.
Child poverty is not acceptable and it is not inevitable.
I was aware of things to do with poverty when I was younger, as much as my parent tried to hide it.
I couldn't do stuff that other kids done. I struggled to get like school uniform.
I used to have kind of like baggy clothes because I couldn't afford kind of fitting clothes.
House was never really decorated because it cost money. There was always struggles to like put heating on and stuff like that.
As a young person, like you have to learn how to do things yourself, especially when I went from being in care to living on my own so suddenly. It was hard.
In my experience, it's been being unable to pay rent and lecky and then having to choose what you pay that week kind of thing. It's this big cycle of, do I pay for lecky this week? Do I pay for food this week? And for me personally, it's been kind of isolating in a way.
Even more so now with the cost of living crisis, I think there's a lot of people struggling to afford basic necessities, even like gas and electric. I know right now that my mother's been struggling to pay the bills on gas and electric, and I'm sure there's a lot of young people that are kind of suffering from that as a whole.
When I was younger, I would purposely miss school and go work because education wasn't that important when you're trying to get food. Well, I was always different from everyone else at school. I was never allowed on like trips because it was too expensive. Never had the same like clothing as everyone else, like Nike, Adidas. And I never had anyone around at my house because everyone seemed to be different. Like I was like a different person.
Someday my dad would go without and I felt really bad that he would sometimes go without any dinner or a very small plate of dinner to make sure that I was fed.
It's hard to get a qualification when you can't focus on your studies, especially as a young person, because you're worrying about other things in your life. Like you're worrying about money, you're worrying about asking your parents for something because you know they can't afford it, or you're just worried about your friends getting the latest thing and you don't have it.
Poverty in Dumfries and Galloway for young people kind of crushes any kind of hopes and kind of aspirations they have for future. I feel like they get kind of lost in the fact that they might not be able to get out of it. I know that I still kind of struggle with that kind of that fear of, well, if I don't get out of poverty, I'm just kind of another statistic.
There was points where I was sitting for days without food, like anything, and it destroyed me. Like you were questioning, is there any point? I'm trying, I'm working, I'm at college, I'm doing all these things to try and get more money, get better and get out of poverty. But you're not getting anywhere.
I definitely think over the past few years we've seen an increase in young people attending services who are coming in genuinely hungry or looking for food that they can then take home to siblings and family members. We've seen an increase in young people expressing worries about family situations or how am I going to afford Christmas for mum, how's mum going to afford Christmas for us. I think COVID's had a massive part to play in that. And I think across the region we're seeing that kind of increase in worry about family situations.
Not even just young people, but like say families with young people. A lot of sort of people needing food parcels and energy vouchers to sort of manage their, because they can't afford their electricity. So we do see quite a lot of those, especially working down in the bureau. We see quite a lot of those, and we also have an emergency phone line where we do get a lot of fuel voucher requests and food parcel requests. So obviously, if we're getting a lot of those requests, it shows that poverty is an issue amongst, not only just amongst young families, but also young people as well.
Well, we started Grub Club in 2018, and that was to combat holiday hunger. So we run it like 3 days a week in the holiday time for the kids and their families. That started with like 3 small children, and now I have about 23 at 3 o'clock. Just the back of 3 coming in to see if I've got anything. I've seen some of the children actually saying, can I take this for my mum?
So we're going to do a little workshop around Through Young Eyes, which is focusing on poverty from the perspective of a young person, or young persons. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. So what does the word poverty mean to you?
I think poverty is like when some people are less fortunate than others and they can't afford things they need, like food.
Sometimes they don't even have enough money to get like the big essentials that they need. Today we came to come do some workshops and stuff which were actually really eye-opening, because some of the things that we discussed are some things that like I knew but I hadn't really thought about it until today.
Poverty isn't always visible. It's like inside homes, and it's just like their parents don't have enough money to pay for food, electricity, warm water, heating.
I mean, food is a big part of it. A lot of people do come down here just to have something to eat because their parents can't afford it.
What factors do you think can cause poverty?
I think it could be cost of living and family breakdowns.
It could be like your house is getting flooded.
It could be like too many people and like not having enough support for them all.
What about addiction and illness?
The kind of causes of poverty over here are the lack of jobs and the lack of support that people get, especially in a small town like Stranraer, and the lack of opportunities people get where in Stranraer, whereas to like Glasgow and all that, it's a bigger city, so there's more things to do, whereas down here there's not a lot of things to do. Most jobs are taken up by people and it's harder to find work.
Let's make a list for all the things that need to be done for young people.
More jobs, more funding for opportunities for young people.
More equal opportunities for young people.
More like support from like the government or something like that, like for like funding for like different actual necessities.
Make food banks more accessible to young people.
Nobody actually knows who's there to support them. Like, they don't know where to go to have a conversation with somebody about like what they're struggling with, and like sometimes that's all people need is just to be able to sit and have a conversation with somebody and know that they're not going to get judged within that conversation.
You know, reach out to young folk, kind of ask what they think they're struggling with, because it could be a multitude of things. I know for me that I really struggled to go anywhere when I was younger. Before the free bus passes were introduced, we didn't have enough money to be able to go and travel and do things as a family, as individuals. Even now my mother still struggles to actually do anything on her own because we just don't have enough money for the bus fares. I know that when the free bus passes were introduced for under 22s, it really benefited.
I think like there needs to be signposting it and where young people can go to get help or like just have a conversation. And I think the key thing that needs to be in it is the fact that it's all right to reach out for help, because not like it's still so like it's a really taboo subject, like touching like actually people opening up with the fact they actually need help and the fact they're actually in poverty. And I think now more often than it ever was, obviously due to inflation and cost of living and stuff, like more people are needing help.
Thank you for that, and thank you for making this plea on behalf of the young people of Dumfries and Galloway, and that's why we're here, to listen to your plea and the words that you spoke very articulately during that performance. I'll hand over to Mark to introduce our three people and see if there's anything else they want to contribute.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to just hand over to the young people who will introduce themselves as they present, and they'll just spend a few minutes taking us through some of the key messages that that came out of the film, and then we'll open up for questions through yourself, Chair.
I'm Emma from Stranraer, and I was involved with the Free Young Eyes steering group. So this is a bit more about the project background. Poverty is often seen through the lens of statistics and reports, but for those who experience it, it's a daily struggle that affects every aspect of their lives. As a group of young people, we felt like it was our responsibility to bring a fresh perspective and to create space where children and young people could share their own experience and have their ideas listened to. We decided to do this through the media of film, and from November 2023, for 6 months, we went out and about talking to young people in youth groups and schools, working with focus groups and talking to individuals on how they see poverty and how some they may experience poverty. We talked to young people right across the region, from Stranraer through to Moffat, asking the questions, what does poverty mean to you? How do you think children and young people might experience poverty differently to an adult? What do we need to do to make our region a safer and fairer place for children and young people?
My name is Ribbons, and I was also involved in the Through Young Eyes steering group. Whilst we were conducting workshops and filming the actual film, we were speaking to young people and identified 8 key messages. Limited opportunities was the first one, poverty restricting their access to education, extracurricular activities and career opportunities, and limiting their potential and future prospects. This can be through transport, access to kit or equipment, and costs for participating in activities. Young people mentioned that the cost of school trips or needing things such as football boots to participate in local groups or being able to attend events or go to the cinema with friends. Mental health was another one. The stress and anxiety caused by financial instability contribute to mental health challenges, including depression, low self-esteem, and a sense of hopelessness. This was an issue for young people themselves, but young people were also indirectly affected by the mental health challenges of their parents, carers, and siblings. Young people talked a lot about the pressure and stress at home that often leads to parents arguing over money, and in turn, they then worry about their parents. A lot of extra stress children and young people shouldn't have to experience. The third was social stigma and isolation. Young people often feel stigmatised and isolated because of their economic status, leading to feelings of shame and exclusion from social groups. Some didn't like to invite friends round because the house was cold or they might notice that their house hadn't much food, etc. And as before, not being able to participate in the same activities as friends adds to the isolation that young people feel. The fourth was impact on education. Poverty affects academic performance due to factors like lack of resources, poor home and study environments, and the need to balance school with responsibilities like part-time work or caring for family members. For some young people, there wasn't a routine at home. Simply like having a good night's sleep or eating breakfast in the morning impacts on how young people engage at school. And some young people avoided going to school because they didn't have clean uniform towards the end of the week or didn't have the correct uniform.
My name's Hannah. I'm going to continue with the key messages. Insecurity and instability. Constant financial insecurity creates an unstable environment leading to frequent housing changes, food insecurity, domestic violence and uncertainty about the future. How can a young person be expected to think about their future when they don't know if they will get fed that night? Or dream of a career if they know that the university is way out of reach for their family? Young people in poverty live day to day. Their focus is on surviving, not thriving. Barriers to basic needs. Access to essentials like nutritious food, healthcare and safe living conditions are often compromised, affecting overall well-being and development. The harsh reality is, this is life for some children and young people in Dumfries and Galloway. And when you are living with this pressure, stress and uncertainty day in, day out, it has to affect not only your physical health, but your mental health too. We have really good initiatives delivered through the Council's Poverty and Inequalities team that help young people, such as Period Dignity, Back to School Free Uniform, the Discretionary Grant, and so much more. And we need to build on this to help address some of the issues discussed today. Resilience and strength. Despite these challenges, young people demonstrate remarkable resilience, finding ways to cope and to support each other. The call for action. So the film was never actually meant to be or intended to be a call to action or to identify solutions, but hoped to urge decision makers, support workers and communities to continue to address the systemic issues that perpetuate poverty and to provide better support for young people in need in Dumfries and Galloway. And we hope that this has been the case today.
So what do we want to do next? So we want to continue to raise awareness of the key messages to professionals. So far, we have held 2 events for organisations and individuals working with young people, and the film has recently been published on social media, YouTube, and Dumfries and Galloway's Cost 11 website. We presented to the Minister for Public Health, Jenny Minto on her recent visit to D&G and have been since invited to speak at Parliament next year. Develop a toolkit for practitioners to have conversations with young people about poverty in brave spaces, which will be ready in early January. We'll work with Dumfries and Galloway's Youth Council to identify actions that we can take forward to begin to address some of the issues highlighted within the film. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll open it to members' comments and questions. Councillor Marshall on Teams.
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, can I just say a massive congratulations to all young people that are involved in the production of what is a powerful and hopefully impactful film production. And there's been a lot of work went into that, and also thank you all for articulating so well the action plan and the key messages that you've presented today. One of the things, obviously there's been a number of interventions and programmes to try and address this, and I'm just wondering, through your extensive consultation with young people, I'm just wondering, if you look now, do you see there being an improvement? Obviously it's an ongoing challenge, but was there an inclination that we seem to be coming out of that, or is there still more required apart from the interventions that are already in place?
I think the main consensus from young people is that they know that they are there a lot of the time, but they need a little bit more signposting or a little bit more nudging to go towards the help that is there already. Quite a lot of young folk didn't know what help was there. It's really about signposting where young people can go for the help that they require.
Okay, happy with that, Councillor Marshall?
Yes, thank you. And well done once again.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Jimison, Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Scobie.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks for the presentation. It's really helpful to get the perspective from young folk, and that's not in any way being patronising, it's just being honest, because we live in a different world, if you like. What I'm interested in, and my pet subject, is education, and a lot of the stuff that's going on, I would argue, is reactive, maybe short term. What I'm interested in from you is, do you feel you get enough support at school, given children in poverty have a lot of challenges, as has been clearly identified in this? Do you think there's enough guidance, encouragement, support, particularly to children with these challenges out with the school environment? You know, guidance teachers have got an average of 250 children to look after. Class teachers might be focused on SQA results and things like that. When children from these backgrounds go to school with all the problems they've got taken with them to school, is there enough support there in terms of staffing in schools, and also things like somewhere to study after school, IT equipment, things like that, because that's something that we, the council, can have an effect on. So I'm just interested in your perspective. I've got a perspective, but I'm really interested in your feelings, having spoken to young folk in poverty. Thank you.
I think because of this, like, as poverty is quite a prominent issue, young people are still ashamed of it, so that, to be in that situation themselves. So then when they go in, they're less likely to go and approach a teacher and be like, I'm struggling, like, I need help. They're probably, I would say, a good 90% of them wouldn't do that. So I think, although there's probably a support there within the schools, it's then having young people to feel empowered enough to then say, so that's part of the purpose of the film, is to try and raise the awareness so that then we can then get support there that's discreet as well, so that young people aren't feeling that they have to, like, basically wave a flag around and go, I'm in poverty, I need help. I think it's that discreet method of support is required.
Yeah, that's really interesting and insightful, but it doesn't surprise me at all. So I think the take-home message for me and the Education Committee is to ensure that that feeling, and I'm sure a lot of teachers understand that they're busy and all the rest of it, and they've got targets themselves, but I'm a great believer in your social background shouldn't affect your opportunity to gain qualifications, go to further education, get a good job and all the rest of it. It's building confidence. So I totally take on board that stigma, if you like. We need to take that away so that teachers probably need, and not just teaching staff, but social work, everybody needs to understand that, at least like mental health, there's a masking process there, but it's something we need to address to take away the stigma and actually make that extra effort, because we know the schools that are in the socioeconomic challenges, so we need to take away the stigma and actually put something in that is normal for everybody. But that people in poverty, their particular issues are understood sensitively. But some head teachers I speak to really worry about the lack of aspiration, and they don't mean that as an insult. They just mean that some children are so bogged down with life that their aspirations are limited, and I think that's something we as a council should be addressing. So thanks for that feedback.
Thanks, Councillor Jimison. I've got Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. It was really powerful and thought-provoking. Gets me every time I came along to the launch event at the Robert Burns Centre, and I think it's so important that we hear directly from our young people. And I'd just like to thank you for having the courage to tell your stories and share your experiences. And I don't actually have any questions, but I would like to say that I think my plea would be to all members that we remember this presentation when we're working on our budget proposals. Because 26% of our young people in poverty and children going hungry is absolutely unacceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. I've got Councillor Scobie.
Thanks, Chair. I've spoken to a number of people throughout the region on child poverty, and really they don't recognise that there's 1 in 4 or more than 1 in 4 children living in poverty. And that's a dilemma that we've got. And they think because you don't see people sleeping on the street and so forth, that we don't face any kind of poverty. I'd like to ask the young people there, how do we get this message out to all these people that are out there in the community that don't either recognise or accept that we are living with children, 1 in 4, more than 1 in 4 children living in poverty. We've got a powerful media through Facebook and different things. How do you see getting that video, that film out there so that people can see just what it's like to live in poverty, and that we are got more than 26% of children living in poverty?
We have the video released on YouTube and in very accessible places, but also the people who came along to the launch events and things had the video sent to them, and we hope that they have gone and spread that presentation as well. We are trying to get it into schools and shown around youth work as well, but it is in already very accessible spaces, so we've just got to kind of push it a little bit further in hopes that more people will see it around the region that aren't just councillors and are just regular people, and so they know what's going on.
Yes, I think you've got a powerful message in that film. Councillor Scobie again.
No, I just wonder if there's anything we can do, because I know that I'm sitting here knowing anything about Facebook or TikTok or whatever the rest of the words are, but it's how can we help get that message out so that people do realise and maybe contribute into tackling poverty. Is there any media that we haven't covered and that we should be? That's a powerful film that you've produced. And as Sean said, I would congratulate you on the film, but we need to get that message out there. It's really, is there anything more we can do to get that out there?
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. I think that there's an obligation in all professionals working in the field of tackling poverty and inequalities to help share the video, but to share it in the basis of the toolkit that the young people are planning to produce as well, because I think that if you were just to show that video in different community settings in schools and youth groups without the work that would go on behind that to make sure the young people know about what they can do, because what we don't want to do is present that, they recognise maybe some of the circumstances that they're in, when in actual fact at home they're maybe getting told they're not in poverty because parents are trying to protect them as children. So I think that the toolkit and the work that goes alongside that's going to be really critical as we roll that out in 2025. And I think it's something that I'll be happy to pick up with our council's communications team as well, about how we can look to use this as a tool to maybe get that message out to the wider population in terms of ensuring that they're informed of what the situation is within Dumfries and Galloway, because I think the challenge in a rural area always is, as you alluded to at the start, that it's maybe not as visible it would be as if you were in Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, with people living on the streets or accessing significant homeless accommodation. So it is a hidden poverty, and we know that from across rural parts of Scotland, and it's a common issue that we've got. So I think I'll take on an action around speaking to our council's communications colleagues about that, and then I know the young people, when they produce the toolkit in January, will then be rolling that out across all secondary schools and youth groups across third sector in the council in the new year.
Thanks very much, Mark. Stephen, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think I've been really struck by the presentation and the video, and can resonate with a lot of it, having been brought up in poverty as a child myself. In terms of communications, I think it's essential that we get the toolkit and the film to the council's senior leadership team and the council's management team as well, so the senior officers as well as the elected members are well aware of this, because poverty cuts across everything that the council does, everything in society, not just those who live in poverty. So I think in addition to what Mark said, we can also target, the senior leaders from an officer perspective within the council.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got Councillor Drysdale and then Councillor Ferguson and McFarlane.
Morning, everybody. It's great to see you all. Thanks so much for the presentation, which I was fortunate enough to attend in Dumfries just recently. And indeed, it's extremely moving. And we all need to have a great higher level of interest and involvement in child poverty across the region, as it impacts so many people. So I just wanted to ask the young people today, it's important that you, as young people, have exactly the same rights and accessibility to education as Councillor Jameson has alluded to. And I just wondered if you all felt you were getting enough support at school with regards to advice on, per se, apprenticeships, filling in CVs, going for interviews, etc. Now, I'm extremely aware, I work occasionally with obviously Mark and Paul and the team in the West, and I know how good they are at contacting you all and running the youth groups across the region. But I just wondered if you felt you had enough access to help for those of you who wish to get into work, either during school, if you were able, or after school. So it was just really to get your opinions on that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think personally, with still being in schools and just coming up to prelim exam season, I don't think it's I see, especially with people in like poverty or whatever, aren't going to be able to even afford, flashcards, might not have Wi-Fi at home to access stuff like SQA pass papers, or they might not have enough for the basic essentials like that. And in school as well, I don't think it's talked about enough, things like that. You might not be able to do your homework because you don't have Wi-Fi, and quite a lot of teachers will put it down to just, you're being lazy. Everybody has Wi-Fi. I don't think they realise how many young people go through stuff like that.
Thanks very much for that, Emma. Have that answered, Councillor Drysdale?
Yeah, I really am happy with that answer. I think it's really important that we as councillors can work as hard as we can, Chair, to ensure, through social work and other parts of the council, to ensure that all of our children are able to access Wi-Fi, whether it's through the youth groups or our open spaces within our communities. They need to be able to have somewhere safe to go to be able to do homework. So I totally understand what you're saying, and I really appreciate you opening up about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Ferguson.
Good morning. Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Firstly, I think it's a huge congratulations. I know a number of the faces there. I've met them over the years, and it's always humbling when you hear your point of view. Two things. One or two things that kind of worried me a wee bit here is there seems to be amongst some of the elected members a preponderance of discussion about school, but school's only a third of your day. And what do you do for the other 2/3 of your day? Do you still go hungry or whatever it might be? So I think we're actually needing to shift the focus a wee bit from not only to be in school, but also to be going to the Oasis, for example, or to the youth club or the youth groups or whatever it is across the region, and actually see what kids know in the small hours. One of you referred to not having resources to study for your higher prelims, for example. I'm sure there's something that the council we can do about that, but it's getting it to you in a place that's accessible to you, and and where you're comfortable. We've got all that. So that's kind of comment up to now, and it's a well done to everybody involved. The bit that's I'm going to home in on here is that we set this committee up to have teeth, right? We've had a couple of councillors talking today about poverty and what we need to do and look at it in the budget and everything else. I'm actually going to propose now that we actually add a 2.3 to the recommendations, and that is that the chair, on behalf of this committee, writes to the Westminster government to have them remove the 2-child cap. That immediately it would free up hundreds, if not millions and millions of pounds across different local authorities in Scotland, and that needs to be done. So I'm looking for a seconder for that, and that would show the rest of the world that this committee is going to has got teeth, and B, more importantly, we're going to use them. And I think that's a message that the young people need to get from this meeting today, is that we're behind them, we're supporting them, and we'll do everything we can. If we don't do things like lobby central governments, both UK and Scottish governments, I'm not going to differentiate between the two, but on this occasion, we need to we need to get the message down to Westminster in the first instance. They could do it tomorrow, and the difference that would make to a lot of families, the income coming into families, it would be huge. So I'm not sure if we're at the time for recommendations yet, Chair, but can you bring me back in at that stage so that I can do the 2.3, please?
Okay, we'll come to that in the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Do you want to respond on that one from the young people? No. We'll move on to Councillor McFarlane's question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to second Councillor Ferguson's proposal. I think that would be an excellent way of making a meaningful difference. I'd like to say thank you to the young folk for their presentation. I thought it was very powerful, very emotional as well, and it's really difficult to understand how difficult it is for young people, and I think that sometimes they perhaps see us as aloof from it, and please don't think that is the case. It's very important to us all. One of the key reasons that this committee was set up was to address such things, and I think that here in this first meeting, the very first presentation really has reinforced the need that we have for it to pull it all together. Previously we've dealt with these things disparately, and I do think that it's good that we're going to have this focus and that we're going to take it forward. And picking up on Councillor Marshall's point about housing, I do think that that's really important, but I think this really reinforces the point that child poverty makes such a difference to the whole community and all your lives on the way forward. I'd really just say thank you for that, and that I would be happy to second Councillor Ferguson's proposal. Thank you.
And do you want to come back on that one, or we? It speaks for itself. I've got Councillor Marshall, then we'll go to the recommendations.
Yeah, I just want to come back in with regards to, I think it was Councillor Scobie had asked the young people directly, what more can we do? Now, if you look at the name of this committee, the first two words is tackling poverty. It should be our raison d'etre in going forward. And I think the one thing, and is really frustrating, we've heard 1 in 4 children are in poverty. it doesn't seem to be that that's going to improve overnight. And the one thing that we as councillors, all councillors from all political parties, and especially all the councillors on here, we should be trying to actually, at the moment, a lot of the anti-poverty interventions that Dumfries and Galloway Council do is through policy development. I think one of the aims of this committee is to try and get some of these initiatives to combat poverty actually into core funding. If you look at the next report, we're going to get an excellent report, evaluation report on the summer of play. Yet at the same time, we've been presented with a budget template to actually make savings of 630,000 on anti-poverty and inequality measures. So, you know, why should we actually have to put these in the budget every year when they should be embedded into the core services of the council? I think that's one of the things we should concentrate going forward, because until we see improvements in poverty across our region, then we shouldn't have to submit policy development every year. It should be actually in the core budgeting. And I would like to see that included in the recommendations going forward, that we as a committee work towards trying to embed some of these things so that they're not under threat every year going forward, especially the impact and the things that are being done within the region that are at risk through lack of funding.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. I think we'll get an opportunity later in the papers to explore what you've said there. And I'll ask Councillor McGregor there to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, superb presentation. Thank you for coming this morning. And I think my call back to you is that we will do our absolute best to facilitate cascading that video and that message out as far as we can, and that's an absolute. Are you going to present to the Community Planning Partnership Board? Because I'm very mindful that a lot of what you've said involves our other partners as well, and particularly NHS. And I think that we need to be the facilitator to help you get that message out to wider partners, NHS partners, and hopefully beyond as well. I've taken away a couple of action points that I'll go away in my head, certainly around signposting where help is. I think education has a role to play within that. And devices and connectivity, that's the thing that we can probably do something about fairly swiftly, not through the delegations of this committee, obviously, but through other means. And I know that in the Scottish Borders, and I've been harping on about it for years, every school-aged child has an iPad and connectivity. And I think that we should be looking along the lines of delivering something similar. There's been resistance within the council's IT team to do that to date, and we did some things through COVID, but I think if we're serious about enabling young people to access whatever they need to access, I think we maybe need to readdress that as well, because that's clearly a really important part of trying to help get kids out of poverty.
Okay, any would you like to come back about that?
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, in terms of the Community Planning Partnership, there's arrangements can put in place to present this at a range of forums, including the CPP, over early 2025, including going to the Scottish Parliament as well to share it. So I'll keep the committee advised of when the date for that's sorted.
I've got Councillor Scobie there. Is it a question about for the young people, Councillor Scobie, or can you?
It's more in response to what's been said, Chair.
Okay then.
Yeah, I'm delighted to hear that it'll be taken to comms and Stephen will take it to the SLT and so forth. I think there's this, that video or film should be in every official's toolkit wherever they go, whether it's to community councils or whatever, once we get the approval of the young people that they would want to share that as a public document. So it's how we get that message out and then cascade it right through the region. But just to come back, and I put on the chat that I'm happy to second Andy, but I'm no precious. If Andy McFarlane wants to be the seconder, I'm more than happy for that to be the case. But I think we should mention as well, because it is political, it's 17 years of austerity, it's, or rather 14 years of austerity and 17 years of continual cuts to public services that has caused this. And as one of the young people said in the video, poverty isn't inevitable. This could have been tackled a lot sooner, not just through the two-child cap, but in other ways. And the constant cuts to public services has had its effect, and this is the effect that it's having on children. More than 1 in 4 living in poverty. So when we mention the two cap, maybe we should mention too about austerity and the 14 years of austerity and 17 years of constant cuts for a Scottish government.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Scobie. I think from you'll have noticed from the comments from the councillors that they are really keen to tackle poverty and that they've listened carefully to what you have said. So thank you very much for giving us that presentation. Like to go to the recommendations. We have agreed to receive the presentation, and we can note the findings from Through Young Eyes as detailed in 4.5. Everybody happy to note that? And yeah, we have thanked the young volunteers for their work in producing the film, and they've answered our questions superbly and very professionally. So thank you very much for that. So thank you very much for that. And Councillor Ferguson wants to add a further recommendation 2.4, which is about caps to benefits. And I think this amendment could be one of your first achievements to get the council to lobby on families and young people's behalf. So, Councillor Ferguson, do you want to come in again?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's quite simple, really. I appreciate some of the comments Willie made there just a minute or two ago, but the two children cap is something that could have an immediate effect, whereas we can't undo whatever our political viewpoint is, and I'm really keen not to make this political here. So we've got any amount of reasons and the problems we've had over the recent years, but for me, the immediate thing that we can do is get you to write on our behalf to the Westminster Government and urge them to scrap the two-child cap and benefit. That would make an immediate difference. They could do that tomorrow if they wished with the numbers in Westminster. They could do it tomorrow, and so I'm moving that's what we do as a committee, and that would actually be a sign of support to the young people and all the work that's gone into this presentation today, that we actually mean business and we're on their side, and we'll do everything we can to try and sort things. Thank you.
Okay, it's clear we've got a brief form of words which covers Councillor Ferguson's points.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got agree that the Chair write to the Westminster Government to remove the two-child cap on benefit, recognising that this would make an immediate difference to children living in poverty.
I've got Councillor McFarlane's second in that. Is there a counter proposal on on this? I've got Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, it really just suggests maybe an amendment if the mover and seconder agree to that not only to write to the UK government but to the Scottish government, taking on board what Councillor Scobie has said. The next item is actually identifies that there's another cut to anti-poverty measures that the Scottish government have just done with regards to the summer of play. So I think writing to the Scottish government to try and ask them not to cut anti-poverty measures, which that is just the latest one of a number that they've actually introduced fund and then removed it later on.
Okay, Councillor McFarlane wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be happy to second Councillor Ferguson's proposal. In response to Councillor Scobie and Councillors Marshall, we say we don't want to make it political, but here we are, and I can't help but feel that there is a political aspect to some of those comments. The focus here really needs to be about how do we deal with poverty and how do we tackle it and how do we meet the needs of our younger people. One of the key issues for me is that as adult you can live in poverty, but you have a route through work and through any other number of options potentially to sort of improve your situation. As a child, you're dependent very often, and it's very, very difficult for you to sort of deal with that. There's a level of control over your life ordinarily by adults, and I do feel that as a consequence it's really, really important that we focus on the key issues here, which is about how do we support these young children. I think Councillor Ferguson's motion, what it does is if it were to be successful, would mean that there would be millions of pounds become available, which would be a big step in the first place to try and progress this. Picking up on Councillor Marshall's point directly, yes, there has been a suggestion that there's going to be a lack of funding from the Scottish Government in relation to that, but you're talking about £100,000, in which it's not nothing, but in the grand scheme of things, it isn't going to make a great deal of difference. And I think it's really, really important that we focus on what the point is here, rather than any political perspective. Thank you.
I think the focus and the issue is about poverty across Dumfries and Galloway and how it affects young people. And we don't want to be political. We want to be all-inclusive, not taking part in political points. I'm quite prepared to write to both UK and Scottish governments to make poverty a priority, because that is my job. I don't want to be caught in a fight between two parties pushing their own political agendas. I've got Councillor Wilson want to come in, and I've got Councillor McGregor.
Thank you. I actually think it's ridiculous. It is getting political. I think we should be writing to both governments, but not making it. It's not political for me. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that it turns into political point scoring when we're talking about 26% of young people living in poverty. Disgusting, really. Thank you.
McGregor.
Hopefully I'll temper the tone a wee bit. Could I suggest that we deal with the funding from Scottish Government in the next two reports? Because I think it's more relevant to the subject matter of those reports, and just stick to the two-child benefit cap on this one.
I would agree, because this one's relevant to children, and we've got an opportunity to raise the matters on the Scottish Parliament later. And Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I've not spoken yet, so thank you very much for that presentation. My ward is one of the wards that has the most amount of child poverty, and I see that day in, day out. Now, I represent my ward, having lived there for a long, long time. And the reason I live in North West Dumfries, I was a single parent at 20, 21, and I brought my son up on my own for 10 years. So, you know, I lived on the breadline for a long, long time. I was more on the breadline and living in poverty then. There's no shame to it at all, you know. It's difficult. Sometimes decisions get made that are not within our hands, and it puts us there. But I had one child at that time, and the two-child cap doesn't make any difference if you've got one child or two children, sorry. So whereas there's a potential that it could change the income of some families. If you have one or two children, it's not going to make any difference, and that's where it becomes a political will, and will not help children from families with less than 3 children. So I think it's really disappointing that we're going down this route, when in actual fact there's lots we can do within the council, and taking what some of the things you've said from your video and what you've said today. I know in my ward, I'm always keen in North West Community Campus that they get in as many professionals as possible, so that the children in there realise that it doesn't matter if you're born in poverty or you're living in poverty just now. You're more than capable of being a nurse, a doctor, a surgeon. You're more than capable of having a job at the council, and it's well within your grasp. And you belong here as much. You know, we see Stephen there who's come up through that. And I always want to make sure, just like for my own children, that it doesn't matter where you come from. If you need support, please ask for it. And, you know, we want you to be the best that you can be when you do grow up. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Stevenson. And we're happy to take the recommendation that we right about the 2-child cap benefit, and we can take the issue of further representation of the Scottish Government up later in the agenda, because I think we're losing focus on the fact that we're concentrating on young people in Dumfries and Galloway at the moment. We're happy to do that, take that forward. Councillor Ferguson.
That's okay, Chair. I was going to say something, but I'll keep my peace. We've just wasted the best first moment we could have had in this committee by being political, and it certainly wasn't meant that way. And like you and the Vice Chair said, the issues raised by certain individuals could have been raised at the next 2 items. But hey ho, I'm happy if it's unanimous, and we can cover the other issues about the Scottish Government in the next 2 agenda items. Thanks very much.
Well, let's agree that recommendation as clear as read out, and let's move on. Thank you very much, young people, for that. So you've really answered our questions very well, and thank you very much for your hard work. Yes, I hope we can move forward a bit more, less politically. We're all gathered here with the same common cause, is to tackle equality, inequalities, poverty, and the housing. So let's try and keep the politics off the agenda and act as one rather than four or five different factions. So thank you very much for that. We're moving on to the next item of business, which is evaluation of cost of living project for children and young people, Summer of Play 2024, report by Head of Thriving Communities. Each meeting of this committee will receive an evaluation report on a project that our council delivers to tackle poverty and inequalities and mitigate against the worst effects of cost of living crisis. This is the first of these reports, which gives members the opportunity to scrutinise the work that was delivered over the summer for children and young people as part of the Summer of the Play programme 2024, which has helped children across the whole of the region. Mark Malloy, Service Manager, is here to assist if members have any questions. So I'll open it up to debate.
No specific questions at this stage, but I want to commend the report. I think it's a superb report, and a lot of people do say, you know, do we get value for the investment that we make in our anti-poverty strategy funding? And I think that this is an exemplar of showing us what we're getting for that commitment and investment, and you know, the wide variety of information around the number of kids that have participated, you know, across the region. We know it's pretty equal across the region, but also the breakdown again of, are they lone parents, are, you know, what's the family situation. So I think it gives us quite a lot of rich data around the value of that investment. And we all know, I know that Councillor Drysdale is always very keen to see young people as active as possible and getting all the opportunities they can. So I suppose again it's around the promotion of this scheme, ensuring that people understand that it's been a really good value scheme. I know that a lot of clubs nowadays, I will note the squash club in Lockerbie, have invested in equipment and shoes to enable people to be able to participate if they can't afford to. So I think it's a real showcase of what not a huge amount of money can give a massive amount of benefit. So it's just to thank the team.
Councillor Scobie first, then Councillor Lowe, and then Councillor Jimison.
Yeah, just to echo the sentiment that's expressed by Gail there, and that's a good report. It highlights how we've used the monies that we put in through summer programmes and etc. But poverty doesn't stop at the summer programme. I look at page 19, Children, Families and Social Work, and Mark Malloy will know, and indeed Charles Rocks, when we were looking at Christmas hamper project in Stranraer to try and tackle the poverty that many families will face at Christmas. We struggled to find the money. Indeed, there was some nearly 300, a massive increase in the number of hampers needed at Christmas time through this project. But then when we tried to get the funding for it through any means that social work had, the numbers drastically reduced. That didn't mean to say that those families will no suffer poverty at Christmas. So, you know, we will not tackle this issue on our own. And I think that's highlighted in the paper, both at 3.2 and again at 4.23. So I don't apologise for raising this as a political issue. It is a political issue. And the young people echoed that when the young kids said poverty isn't inevitable. We've got to find Scottish and UK governments to tackle this poverty. The removal of the two-child cap is one way. The other is to properly fund. And I would hope that we will write to the Scottish Government and ask them to reconsider its position and to reinstate the poverty money that we got for them. I think Greatest Hit Radio is to be applauded in terms of what they do at Christmas and their objective in trying to get every child a Christmas present. That's the kind of things that we need to do so that young people are not excluded. And I think a young person said it was not having the money to do what your friends do. And I think this is why we've got this. We had this programme, the summer programme, the hunger programme, and there's one that was involved in that through Stranraer Scottish Week. We greatly appreciated the monies that we got through Mark in providing that, and all kids felt the same. And that's what we should always be aiming for. So I think we should be writing to the Scottish Government, and I hope Andy would be the mover of that, to say that he would want to write to the Scottish Government and say that we want this money restored to tackle the poverty, because, as I say, we'll not do it on our own. So I would welcome Andy coming in on that motion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Scobie, I've noted that. And as a preliminary, we'll take the recommendations. I've got Councillor Lowe next.
Thank you and good morning, Chair and Committee. Yes, I welcome the report and the detail and the amazing work that it does. Just a clarification for those that are slightly newer to being councillors, that the additional money from the Scottish Government, was it sort of like a one-off award? I believe it might have been to do with COVID. But it was always additional supplementary money, and we're still committing £264,000, and that is still doing a great work, so we don't want to take away from that. But I was just wondering clarification of how that additional money came about, because it just does seem to be additional money. Thank you.
A question on additional money, Mark?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Lowe. So in the first year of Summer of Play, our council didn't put money in because it started up as a Scottish Government initiative which funded summer activities across all 32 local authorities. And in year one of that, the Scottish Government's amount valued nearly £500,000 for Dumfries and Galloway. It was 493,000 in the first year of it. And then that has subsequently reduced each year. So our council made the decision a few years ago, when the government reduced the funding for the first year of reduction, to put additional policy money in. So the funding that the council's put in for the last 2 years has always been to keep the amount of funding up to what it was around for year one. So this year was the first year that there was no government funding for any local authority, and they have advised there will be no funding for future years for the scheme, and it would be up to the council to fund it if they wish to continue it.
Thanks for that, Mark. Councillor Lowe, you want to come back?
Obviously something that we'll take a note of when it comes to our future budgets, but yeah, thank you for the reply.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Councillor Jimison next.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, I'm referring to page 19, 4.21, 4.22. My theme today, my objective is to identify the good work that's been going on, but also identify the fact that a lot of it's mitigation and a lot of it's short term. So my focus is that's absolutely essential, but my focus is solutions for the long term. What can we do now that adds value in the long term? So at 4.21 and 4.22, these are the most interesting points for me, apart from all the good work that was done in the relationship building with social work staff and children and young people. Working would have expected many young people to have contact with professional social workers. That's, for me, the crux of the matter, apart from these young folk getting opportunities that they might not have had. It's that additional longer-term sustainable outcomes of social workers working with these children, be able to speak to them and support them in different ways. How important was that over the summer? How effective and longer standing can that be, having met with these children, discussed with their problems, potentially with their parents, with regards to helping them in the future, apart from just having a good day out, helping them mentally and socially, but forward thinking, how big an impact and how helpful is that from that investment and the work that you did?
Mark. Stephen?
Yeah, I think when Mark was asked a social work question, that he quickly looked to myself for some support, so thanks, Mark. No, I think Summer of Play as an initiative has been quite interesting, because initially it was about getting children playing again after the COVID pandemic, and that was the original policy directive from the Scottish Government. But play is really important. It helps build self-esteem, confidence, skills, ability. What Mark and the different providers across Dumfries and Galloway have done over the years is make sure that food was always free, appropriate clothing was provided where necessary, etc. And it's been phenomenal, and particularly in relation to the social work elements. I was a little bit surprised when I read the report in terms of what staff came back with in terms of responses, but also delighted at the same time, because by enabling children and families to spend time together and play out with formal structures, gives them something for themselves. They can build up their own skills, and actually on a longer term basis that will reduce social work interventions for some of these, but particularly over the summer period. As in the report, social workers and other social work staff were able to concentrate on those who are in the most need. So the benefits of this funding are much broader than the specifics around play, and I think this report captures that really quite brilliantly. And you know, I echo reports. So if you don't play, you don't have fun, you don't thrive. We shouldn't underplay that. It's had a massive impact on the social work service and some of our staff morale, being able to be involved in some of the good fun things with families as well as the difficult things. So yeah, it's vitally important, Councillor Jameson.
Councillor Jameson?
No, that's excellent. It is important, as you say, that we get the additional benefits apart from what you provide on the day, and you build on that. So I'm pleased that that was one of the outcomes.
Councillor Marshall, Councillor non-political Marshall.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the only one that's being political today, Chair, to be truthful, but that wasn't my intention either. I think it's about focusing on what we need to do as a committee, and I think this evaluation report speaks for itself on how good a scheme this is, and I've actually seen some of the initiatives firsthand. I know Councillor Ferguson's probably desperate to get into second this, but I'm happy to second the fact that, you know, it was 3-year funding, and you know, that was the last year. So, you know, we are in a situation as a council, and I've already mentioned it, that there is a budget template saving of 630,000 from the anti-poverty and tackling poverty initiative, and this is one of them. This is one of the main parts of that. So we need to continue doing this, and I think I would like to see, apart from happy to second Councillor Scobie that the chair writes to the Scottish Government just to object to the withdrawal of this funding. I think also I would like maybe a report to come back to this committee to see how we can try to embed some of these initiatives into core budgets rather than having to rely on it every year and it actually have the threat of it being taken away each year. It's at the whim of the groups, you know, when they're preparing their budgets, and I don't feel a scheme as important as this should have to kind of fight year in, year out to actually get the funding to be able to continue with it. It's proven that it makes a major impact, so we should be striving to actually ensure that this happens every year.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. I think obviously this is a matter for the budget setting process, and every group should, if that's what groups feel, then they should put it in the budget as part of the core budget. But we can maybe add a wee bit on the end that this committee supports the continuation of this project as part of the core budget, but we don't have any real power to enforce that.
Chair, can I come back on that?
Yeah.
It's really to ask a report how we can influence, and as you know, as a committee that's meant to be tackling poverty, inequalities, and housing, and you know the homeless situation, is how we can actually influence decision making. So it's really just a report back to see how, as a committee, we can try and shape the budget. It may be within our powers that we can actually do certain things. So I do think a report back would be useful.
Yeah, we'll come back to that then. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. I have to agree. I'm a bit slow because I could have been and seconded Willie right at the very start. And I think Councillor Lowe actually just got us the factual situation about the amount of money that came from the Scottish Government. And it was indeed, if I remember correctly, because I think I was chair of communities at that stage, it was COVID money that it started off as. But we are where we are, and it was last year's budget that we moved it forward with. And it was the agreed budget that came through the budget setting process last year that this money should be in that budget. So, where I'm suggesting that it's two things here, is I do think, Chair, without any disrespect to you, we can actually influence this committee, because that's the teeth we said we wanted and we were promised we would have. So we could recommend now to full council, for example, or in the budget process, that this money should be part of core funding. Now, or an amount should be set aside for core funding. Whether it was exactly that, you know, I don't want to get tied up in semantics about it. But the idea of it being core funding is a very sound one, and I totally agree. It should not be an annual bean feast to actually see who's going to are we going to back it or not. So I'm extremely supportive of that. And what I would suggest is when we write to the Scottish Finance Minister, is that we ask her to take into serious consideration the effects, the long-term and the short, medium and long-term effects of poverty in our region when it comes to budget setting. So I'm totally up for writing to them, but there needs to be a reason. And if I can just add, is the reason I put it in, I'm prepared to say that in this item, because this is longer term rather than very short term. I'm happy to go along with that. The other kind of question on the report actually is that it tells us about scoring, but it doesn't tell us how the scoring was done. Could Mark maybe just enlighten us how that came about? And I can come back to my other issues later if you're comfortable with that, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ferguson. Just thinking on solidifying this within the budget, I think this is just one part of the the anti-poverty development budget. So maybe we should leave that item to the next item to consider. Councillor McGregor wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just briefly, I think in terms of the budget, we're all very aware that Budget Panel, which is cross-party, requested that lots of options were brought forward, which officers have prepared. That doesn't mean that elected members will take them, and I think we need to be very clear about that. This is a really successful programme that is reporting back to us today on the successes of that, and elected members will use this as a template to determine through the budget process. So I think that would be my first point. I've no issue writing to any government of any colour on anything that is to the benefit of Dumfries and Galloway, and I've been consistent with that. So I would be very happy for the Chair to write to the Scottish Finance Minister, absolutely, no problem. I think nationally there's some work going on within the scope of fiscal framework that's looking towards multi-year budgets. And I think that would be really useful, that if the UK Government in their spring budget and then cascading to Scottish Government give us multi-year and the surety of funding, even if it's a reduced funding pot, at least we know what we're getting, then we can start to make those commitments to core. But I think just the precarious budget situation that we've been in for a number of years, it's not been possible to make things like this core. So I think there's a lot of strands that need pieced together. No issue writing to Scottish Government, but I think the focus for me today is on a really good report that highlights the fantastic work that not just the Council, but our partners do as well across the region, and they should probably be commended as well.
Thanks, Councillor McGregor. And Councillor Marshall, before we go to the recommendation.
Yeah, happy with that suggestion by Councillor McGregor. I do think, though, that, and this is just one example of an excellent initiative that is tackling poverty. And I think my request for this committee, going forward for a report, it's on this and other tackling poverty initiatives that we may want to consider, because Councillor Ferguson is right, is that we have the chance to influence, and we have the say that we can actually request full council or whatever committee it is to actually move towards trying to get some of these initiatives into the core budget. So I think a future report on some of the excellent initiatives that we would maybe like to see embedded within the core budget is something that as a committee we can ask for and work on. And I think that would be a very positive action for this committee to pursue.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. I think we're going to be better taking that in the next item, because it's more than the summer of play that's at stake here. So, Councillor Ferguson, your hand's still up.
Sorry, it's a legacy, Chair. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, Mark wanted to come back on the scoring system.
Thanks. I'll just come back, Chair, if it's okay, in two of the points. The first thing is to give the assurance to members that we would be bringing a full evaluation of all projects to this committee just after April, which for all the end of year evaluation for every project funded in the current financial year through the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities allocation of 1.8 million within the current budget. And that will come along as it previously did to Communities Committee, so that will now come to this committee, and that will give members the full list of information. But what we're trying to do at each of these committees, with the agreement the Chair and Vice Chair, is having a deep dive into some of the projects that we know have had particular impact for members' consideration. So the hope would be that we'd bring a deep dive, such as the Summer of Play report, to every meeting at your next meeting at the start of the year. It will be a deep dive into a project around energy assistance to people, so that it helps with that idea that you mentioned at the start around theming of some of the committees. So the hope would be that it provides members, as you debate and deliberate on different items, you've got a wealth of information and reports to help give more informed decisions and awareness of a subject area. In terms of the scoring, the question from Councillor Ferguson, points, and the scoring panel for the assessment was led by young people, both from our youth council but also from some of our third sector partners, and the criteria that they used for that was agreed at a previous committee a few years ago, and it was that criteria that was used. I'll be happy to circulate that to members if it's there, but I think we do mention within the appendix the priorities that were agreed previously, so I can circulate that as a specific report, but it is within the appendix on page, I think, I won't reference that, there's so many pages to it, but it's within there and I'll circulate it to members again after the committee.
Stephen, good one.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that for the first 2 years of this funding, I was privileged to act as a professional advisor to the young people. And I would say that it's the only time I've had to be silent, because the young people were brilliant. The compassion, the empathy and the skill with which they allocated this funding across the whole of the region to different vulnerable groups was quite phenomenal. And like I said, it's unusual for me not to speak, but for those meetings I didn't have to say a thing, because the young folk were so great, and the scoring was really helpful. So it was a privilege to be part of, and very skilled and very compassionate.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, that's good. Yeah, so we'll go to the recommendations. Number 1 was scrutinised and agreed the valuation report and appendix. Yeah. Jimison?
I won't take long. You talked about a deep dive. Further reports, could I ask that cognizance is made to the objectives and the long-term sustainable benefits of these projects?
Can I just interrupt you, Councillor Jimison, take that in the next item, because this is particularly on the summer of play.
I'm just responding to the deep dive question, which was brought up by a report that will come forward on this subject. So, with respect, it is relevant, and I think I've got a nod of acceptance there that we need, any deep dive needs to look at the objectives and the outcomes long term. Thank you.
So, Jimison, yeah. So, we've scrutinised and agreed the evaluation report. We've noted the range of activities delivered by council services and third sector partners. And with third recommendation that the chair writes to the Scottish Government enclosing a copy of this report and its benefits across the region, and requesting that this money be reinstated in the government budget as a priority. Is that fair enough? And we'll take at the next item we can consider adding a recommendation on the budget for groups to take forward in their budgets. Item 5, the Galloway Local Child Poverty Action Report 2023-24 and Action Plan 2024-2026. Report by the Executive Director, Education Skills and Community Wellbeing. Dumfries and Galloway Council have a statutory duty to publish a joint annual local child poverty action report in partnership with NHS Dumfries and Galloway. This must detail the action taken to tackle child poverty in the previous business year and our forward plans. Agreement of the annual local child poverty action report is within the delegations of this subcommittee, agreed by a full council on the 27th of June 2024. This report and appendices provide details of activity over the last year and proposed forward plans for member scrutiny agreement. Dan Little, Children's Services Manager, is here to assist the members of any questions. This is quite a meaty report, and we'll take them in a methodic way so that we can get through the business efficiently and allow everybody to have the say on it. Now, the first recommendation is to consider the background and requirements of the local child poverty action report as set out in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.48. So I think this section of the debate will, for initial start, we'll discuss these first and before moving on to number 2. So if any member has got a comment, question on paragraphs 4.1 to 4.8, then please come forward. and these points seem straightforward enough. Has anybody got any questions they would like to raise on paragraphs 4.1 to 4.8? Give you a second to have another look at that. Councillor Scobie's first to put his hand up.
Yeah, Chair, it's in relation to both 4.2 and 4.7, and it's how do we tie in to the various voluntary organisations that provide services to, you know, like food banks, food outlets. I can think of the Fed Up Cafe in Stranraer. Do we tie into them to see how they're applying what they do to tackle the poverty? Food banks, I know they put out a weekly report to local members in Stranraer in Ward 1 in terms of how many children that or families with children at different ages. Are we tying into them to see how we are tackling poverty in that respect? And also tying that into 4.7, activity to tackle poverty and inextricably linked to our broader approach. How do we, record that kind of approach to tackling poverty? Do we do that? Have we got that tie-in, that network with the various voluntary and third sector organisations?
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Scobie, I can give the reassurance that a number of third sector groups across the region are actively engaged in our work to tackle poverty and inequalities. Members will recall a couple of years ago we agreed at full council to take forward a partnership approach to tackling poverty as opposed to look on it as an isolated position within our council, which was absolutely the right thing to do. And as part of that we have the Poverty and Inequalities Partnership and a number of subgroups that work under that have active participation from a number of our third sector partners from across the region, including some of the groups that you mentioned there.
You want to come back, William?
Yeah, Chair, it's how do we record that? That's all I'm asking. How do we record the work that they're doing so that it's reflected in any report we're making? Because I can't see it unless Mark can point me to it. I see it at the back, in terms of the plan that we do try and work with them. So I recognise that, and I know that Mark and Wendy Jessen work with the various organisations in warm clothes, etc., free uniforms. How do we record that and recognise that in any reporting that we're doing?
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of coming forward to this committee going ahead, but again previously to Communities Committee, we bring 6 monthly reports on the projects which are tackling poverty and inequalities, and as part of that we provide a number of case studies from our third sector partners in terms of difference and impact and outcomes met for individuals and for communities delivered by those groups. Those are also reported to the Community Planning Partnership on an annual basis, so that the scrutiny is there across all partners, because again this is not just a council matter and a council issue that we need to deal with. So that work is captured and it's there, but I think there's also a balance, because some of the feedback from our third sector partners is that sometimes as the public sector we can be quite onerous on our reporting requirements and trying to acknowledge the capacity of those organisations by not always asking them to provide the same information for different reports. So we do bring the 6 monthly reports which will come to this committee, as I mentioned in the previous report, in April, May time, whenever that meeting is after the financial year ends, that will outline that, and also as part of the reporting to Community Planning Partnership. And also the final bit is on the Community Planning Partnerships website. There is a section specific, or a page specifically around poverty and inequalities, and it's just been agreed that the minutes of all the subgroups and the partnership will be published openly on that, so that all the work of partners can be captured and seen by anyone who's got an interest in that work going ahead in them. Not sure if Darren would want to add anything about the specifics that were required to report on within the Child Poverty Plan, but hopefully that helps in terms of the wider context of reporting.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Drysdale wants to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in. It was just to mention on the report, it is with regards to 2.1, but it sort of runs into 2.2, so sorry if that slightly confuses the issue. But it's with regards to the Forward Poverty Action Plan for 24-26, Mark. I know you've worked really hard with Mark and Wendy, and we've seen the success of the warm winter clothes and the school clothing events. And I'm just wondering if we can look forward with regards to the Child Poverty Action Plan and the child poverty subgroups to talk about how we could possibly extend that to go. We talk to young children a lot, particularly the girls, but some boys as well. Young people find the pressure of dressing out with school and clothing themselves to be a huge pressure, and it really affects their mental health. It's hard to keep up with the amount of impactful advertising that these young people see on social media sites. So I wondered if there was any opportunity, Mark, for us to look at adding in fashion items, sports clothes and sports equipment, because there's certainly a lot of access to that kind of type of material. And when elected members and other members of the public want to drop that stuff off, you're actually a little bit stuck, and you see bags and bags of these sort of items sitting outside other charity shops getting soaking wet when the charity shops aren't open. And whilst we need to support the charity shops, I think there's a definite opportunity for us as a council to look towards marketing ourselves to be able to drop off clothes for young people that could be really easily reused, but obviously it needs to be in a suitable environment. So it was just really to get your feedback on that and if we could include it going forward. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, I'll let Darren come in the last question as well in a minute.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Drysdale. Members may be aware that around 18 months ago, because of the demand for both our pre-loved school clothing and winter warm clothes, that as opposed to us just delivering the one-off events that we delivered during the summer for school clothing and are currently running at the moment for winter warm clothes, we've also got a number of permanent donation points and collection points that are operating across the region. And those give the opportunities for people to make donations throughout the year and also collect clothing throughout the year. Members may also be interested that at the moment through the partnership we are looking at the concept of a multi-bank, which would be a kind of essentially a one-stop shop as opposed to having a food bank, a clothing bank, etc. And it's based on a model in Fife, which is having really significant outcomes and real impact in the community. So there's a number of people from the partnership across third sector and NHS and council going up to look at that in the coming weeks in terms of how we continually evolve the model that we've got and don't just stay stagnant with the model that we've got. But I will take up the point and discussion with partners around the particular points around like sport clothing and sports equipment and other clothing like that, and I will come back to members on that, but I will follow that up after committee.
Thanks, happy with that, Councillor Drysdale.
Very happy with that. Coming back in, Chair, sorry. Just if you could send us an email on that, Mark, just to follow that up so I can spread that throughout my community, because I've got a few people willing to donate bags. And thank you so much for the initiative.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Drysdale. And Dan wanted to come in and Councillor Scobie's last point.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Just to confirm that the approach and format for this particular report is really to satisfy the Scottish Government's reporting requirements around the publication of a local child poverty action report and forward plan. So that's the reason we've taken this approach today, but we have already had some discussions about how we may adapt that approach moving forward. So happy to take on board those comments and the feedback. Thank you.
I think we've covered all the points from 4.1 to 4.8, and we'll go on to the next part, which is scrutinise and agree the Dumfries and Galway Local Child Poverty Action Report 2023-24 and the Action Plan 2024 to 26. So I think if we go through it methodically and start at page 51 and if we do it methodically, we'll go through page 51, and if you get any questions on points there, tackling poverty reference group, and additional funding for school clothing grants, welfare and housing options support team. Is anybody wanting to come in and specifically on these items? Councillor Jimison.
Yeah, I can talk, we can go through each of these, but the general comment I'm going to make is that these are mitigation and reactive. There's nothing in here that is beyond mitigation and reactive. Is that this reason d'etre for these initiatives? Because I'm not being critical here, it's just an observation that all of these things are reacting to poverty. It's tackling poverty. Maybe we need to define tackling, because we want to reduce poverty, so we don't need all these initiatives, which are necessary just now, but none of them go beyond mitigating what's already there, and we're reacting to situations rather than looking for solutions to resolve the situations where people find themselves in.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the projects that are on page 51, 52, 53 and 54, those are mitigations. That's what full council agreed was an investment on mitigating against the worst effects of the cost of living crisis. So the projects that are there are referenced. I can assure members that do have significant outcomes, and they have been presented to committee on a 6-monthly basis, but we were asked as officers to put in place projects that mitigated against the worst impacts, and that's what members have got in front of them is that list of projects and the outcomes achieved by those projects for that investment, and it's there, so it's under that. Guys, there's a number of pieces of work in this report which outlines the outcomes and positive outcomes and prevention work as well, and I maybe just hand over to Darren, because I feel as though I'm hogging Darren's report here when it's but just if that's okay, Chair, because I think Darren could maybe talk quite good about the prevention work that would also answer Councillor Jamison's question.
I was just going to add to what Mark said before Darren comes in, if that's okay. And I totally understand your point, Councillor Jamieson, about some of this being reactive, but not all of it is reactive. Some of it is proactive as well. And we actually have to operate in both of those spaces, because we have to react to the people who currently live in poverty by giving them clothing, for example. And what research into poverty will tell us is the biggest difference we can make is to put, you know, one of the phrases is pounds in people's pockets. Now, we're not going to necessarily put direct money into people's pockets, but by providing them with food, clothing, and the equipment around education, for example, is that. So the additional funding for school clothing is giving people clothing that increases their participation in school, the self-esteem, etc. So it does build. So some of that, although appearing reactive, is also proactive at the same time. Similarly, on page 51, we have the welfare housing options. We've got £220,000 additional money into people's households because of that. Now, that is the best way we can tackle poverty, is putting that money into people's households. So we do have to operate in a really complex environment across multi-factors here that are reactive and preventative. So, you know, I would defend the position of some, well, of all of this spend, actually, that's on this page in terms of where we are, as being an element of reactiveness, but also there's proactive elements to that too, and they can sit hand in hand, particularly around poverty.
I accept that, and it wasn't a criticism, it was just one clarification on the reason for these things. And at the next section, I'll maybe build on the need for solutions-based things rather than mitigating reactive. Thank you.
Dan wants to go into body. You okay?
Happy to come in, Chair, and just add to the discussion and just say the other actions that we see from page 57 onwards do, of course, reflect that balance between mitigation and prevention, which is a difficult balance, as we've discussed. So, yeah, happy to pick that up as we move through the report. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Scobie want to come in, then Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Lowe.
Yeah, Chair, it's to do with maybe page 50 rather than 51, and where they say the third paragraph, the stark reality is that child poverty is still increasing. And at one time it was less than 25%, now we're at 26%. Well, that's more than 1 in 4 children in Dumfries and Galloway living in poverty. And then the penultimate paragraph talks about within Dumfries and Galloway, one of the 12 LOIP outcomes is work together in part to eliminate child poverty. And it's that point there. How can we measure just how effective all the spend is? And we've got it on pages 51 through to 54, and we identify how many children, 400 holiday food fund, where we give them $250 per child, that 450 benefited. But does that bring them out of poverty? So it's really the question of how do we measure how effective we're being with all this spend? Not to take away the spend, but how effective are we being? Or are we, is this perhaps that poverty is an inevitability, that we're just going to live in a society where we're seeing all these children, more than 1 in 4 living in poverty? How do we measure that we are being effective and putting that into the plan against all the mitigations that were taken?
Okay, the question is about how do we measure the effectiveness of these measures? Mark.
Thanks, Chair. Across all the projects, we do have a monitoring and evaluation framework that was agreed that allows us to measure the impact of each of these projects, and that's what is presented to members on a 6-monthly basis, which shows the impact and outcomes for each of those projects that's delivered. I think the challenge is that we are operating within the space where these are mitigations to mitigate against the worst impact, and there's a range of global issues and national issues which will contribute to poverty, and our council and partners can only do so much, and I think that's being quite honest and candid about it. But the assurance is that using that monitoring and evaluation framework that was agreed at committee, it does allow us to focus on outcomes, and in the next report of that will be due to come back to this committee in April, and that will show the outcome and difference for each of the projects that this council funds. And so what you're seeing today in that is a very brief snapshot of that, as opposed to the full monitoring evaluation.
Stephen, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And in addition to that, I think Councillor Scobie's point about, is this making a difference it's the fundamental question, but it's also probably one of the hardest questions that we have to answer, because we know that the cost of living crisis is getting worse, with different conflicts in the world, inflating fuel prices, etc., and that continues to rise. The impact of COVID in terms of people's mental well-being, addictions, domestic violence, etc., all adds to increasing poverty. So if we didn't have these services, would that figure of 26% increase, exponentially or moderately or somewhere in between? But what we've done with these projects is looked at things that we know make a difference, and putting pounds into people's pockets is a phrase that I've used already today. And we're looking at like food, clothing, housing, and benefits maximisation to increase the money that people have. And I think what Darren's done really skillfully in this report is show us how the allocated expenditure has impacted on numbers of people in a positive way that we know will have a positive impact on poverty. What it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't tell us what that means in relation to the top line figure of 26% and whether that would change. But there's no easy answer there. But I do believe by targeting the types of project, we know from research that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you like, in terms of food, shelter and warmth are important. We've got that here. So I think, we continue to do that. The deeper dive that's coming forward as well will also assist. So it's an excellent question, and it's not one that's easy to answer, but hopefully the data and the impact that we see in this report will give some assurance to committee.
Stephen, Councillor Scobie, you want to come back?
Yeah, and I think that's highlighted in 3.1. I know it's difficult to measure, but we seem to be able to measure when it's on the increase, and yet not whether what we're doing, the mitigation that we're applying is starting to reduce that 26%. But I think in this 3.1, any information we we do get or we can deduce, then is helpful, like what we agreed in item 4 to write to the Scottish Government, because 3.1 does point it out. Child poverty remains an extremely important issue, both locally and nationally. So what we're doing has an effect, as Stephen's saying, but it's difficult to measure. But this should go towards, one, advising the budget, and that we shouldn't be looking at reducing child poverty funding there, because it is a local issue, but it's also a national issue. And we should be providing the information to both governments, both Scottish and UK government, to say, look, we need more money to tackle this, because poverty isn't inevitable. We should be able to tackle that problem through fuel, through many other different ways, mitigating factors. And our plan should recognise that. So recognising that it's difficult, but we should always make an attempt to try and see how we can reduce that. 26% is what I'm trying to say.
Thanks, Philip. Councillor Scobie. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I'll take my hand down. Sorry. Just a couple of comments I was going to make here. If you go to 4.2 on page 43, that Scottish Government's Best Start Bright Future Starting Child Poverty Delivery Plan, identifying 3 drivers, that was unanimous. Okay, so, but then the Joseph Rowntree Foundation reckoned that local government and health boards can't affect all of the 3 drivers. And I think what we need to look at here, and whilst I accept a lot of what we're doing here is mitigation, but there's also a huge amount of proactivity, because when you look at the combined total of income maximisation through either DAGCAS or through the in-house team, it's phenomenal. It's staggering, right? The DAGCAS are saying 9.5 million, and then that's only from DAGCAS. Then we've got our own ones inside. And I remember sitting in your seat just now when we commended every single communities committee that very small team were making a huge long-term difference to people and their families because of the way they went about the income maximisation process. And it would be wrong for us to say this is just about grants and about welfare payments. There are a lot of people there who benefited from that, who were just above the welfare threshold. So we, and by doing that, we were proactive and kept some children out of poverty just by doing that one simple thing. So it's a huge commendation for that, I would suggest. And that commendation needs to filter back both to DAGCAS and to our internal teams to thank them for the work they're currently undertaking in that. And that takes nothing away from all the others, volunteers and everything else. We're dealing with in-your-face things, for example, somebody's hungry, they don't have a coat, blah, blah, all that group, these 2 groups of staff, both in DAGCAS and the council, are actually making a long-term real difference to people's lives because they're getting them access to funding they were entitled to but hadn't even known that they were entitled to. So there's a problem there. And so the second part for me here is at 4.11 of the report. I'm actually wondering if we've got the delegations for this committee right, because I'm sure the legislation requires the council and NHS to jointly sign up to the strategy and to the programme. The NHS have taken it to a subcommittee, and then it's being presented to members, to all members, where it's coming here, and we're going to sign it off. So my understanding is that should be signed off by all 43 members, i.e. full council. But I'm be willing to accept if that's not the case. But I'm just wondering here if that could be looked at, because I'm not entirely sure it's legal.
Okay, we'll pass that over to the Governance Officer to assure us on that point.
Okay, thank you. Well, the delegation to agree the council and NHS D&G child poverty action plans clearly in the delegations. It was agreed by full council. Okay.
So we've had assurance from governments that we are acting legally.
With respect, Chair, can I come back in?
Yeah, go on.
Just because it was agreed, it was put forward as a whole raft of recommendations and agreed as one. What I'm questioning here is, does the legislation and the Scottish Government require Council to respond, not a subcommittee?
I think we are responding on behalf of the Council.
Well, Council has given that delegation to this subcommittee, but if you want me to check it, I can see Darren's letting me come in, Chair.
Darren.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to clarify that the legislation and the accompanying guidance doesn't specify who is required to agree the local child poverty action report on behalf of any local authority or health board. So up and down Scotland, there's a variety of approaches taken. In some cases, it's even agreed out with council committees. So as long as Dumfries and Galloway Council have an agreed approach, at which there was at full council, then we're okay to proceed. Thank you.
Are you doubly assured, Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, well, that's right. Okay. I'll never be completely assured that it's the right way to go forward, but I'm quite happy for a subcommittee to make a response on behalf of 43.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe wants to come in.
My question was on page 52, if that's okay. Have we got that far?
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, it's on pages 51 to 54. It's the policy development funding. Now, this is for last year. It was the 2023-24. So, and if we remember back to the budget setting this year, that there was, I think, the three budgets. I think the Labour budget went to retain the most, and then the middle option was the SNP, and the Conservative was the low option for removing funding. But there was funding removed because it was the SNP budget that got through. And I'm just wondering the effects on some of these projects, because obviously the 1,997,000 was reduced this year. And as Mark says as well, that there will be an evaluation coming forward in April for all these projects, so that we can scrutinise them all. My worry is, that there is a 630,000 budget option to cut some of these projects. So by the time we get to April, some of these projects may not have the funding. But I think it is an ideal opportunity when we look at all these within the report in April, because if you look at, and it goes back to my point, it's not about putting them in the budget, Richard, by groups. It's about, although there will be decision on, whether we take that 630,000, and that's up to the groups. But on the opposite page to the front page of the report, it mentions our delegations, and under decision making, it does state that we have the power to recommend to the appropriate committee on matters relating to tackling poverty and inequalities. So when that report comes back in April, I think that is when the time when we can actually identify through the evaluation the projects that we would like to see continue, but more importantly, for maybe them to be included within the core budget. And then that would form a decision that would go to the relevant committee. And ultimately, it might actually rest at the budget panel to look at, how those could be embedded. But I would be quite happy with proceeding in that way to try and ensure we at least get some of these into the core budget as necessary going forward.
Okay, thanks. We'll take that point at the end again. We'll move on to...
No, sorry. I've asked the question about what projects have been affected by the cut in the budget this year through the SNP budget being accepted.
By the majority budget. So who would like to come in on that one? Mark and Councillor McGregor.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the reduction in the budget that was approved, because of some of the projects mainlined funding that was received from Scottish Government, actually no projects did end with that budget that showed the slight reduction from the previous year's allocation. So all the projects that are outlined in that still did continue, and the difference in the funding, which from I recall is around 100,000, was because of some additional funding that came for specific projects from the Scottish Government.
And just to come back, is it will and that additional funding will no longer be available going forward next year. Am I correct, Mark?
No, it will be available, Councillor Marshall. They've agreed to give specific funding in relation to holiday food payments, which they have committed to for the duration of the Parliament that's there. So in the current financial year, members allocated £1.8 million approximately for projects to tackle poverty and inequalities. What the budget template that's out for public consultation, and again would echo the leader's point earlier, these are just options for consultation, is around reducing that by 630,000. However, what's important, for members is that allocation included a one-off allocation for the current financial year we are in. So that consultation for the 630,000 is assuming that the one-off allocation for the current financial year is not continuing, and that's what the template's saying. So if members choose to take the £630,000 saving, essentially it would be ending all projects that are funded for the tune of 1.8 million in the current financial year.
So I think that clarifies that.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
McGregor.
I think that clarifies it brilliantly, and I think we have to keep in mind as well that the Scottish Government will publish a budget on the 4th of December. There is discussions between COSLA and the Scottish Government around community transport and lots of areas that sit within this. So we maybe shouldn't sort of preempt or guess what we are or are not going to get on the 4th of December. But certainly welcome a report in April with that fullness of detail. And maybe even some other projects that could be of benefit.
That's great. So we move on then. We've got the rest, the other projects are listed on page 52, 53 and 54. I won't read them out, but if anybody wants to come in them, I'll bring in Councillor Lowe first. I think you're muted.
Sorry, pardon. Page 52, taxi card scheme. If everybody used their full £100 of vouchers, obviously we completely blow the budget. The budget's 130,000, but 2,297 individuals got them. Would it be possible to ask for that year how many individuals used their cards, whether it's impartial or full? I'm aware of residents locally who either have to pay for taxi because the taxi companies do not accept taxi cards, or they cannot get in a taxi because of mobility equipment. So there'll be people who just don't use this at all. So is it possible just to get the number of actual people that benefited for that money?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Lowe. I don't have the exact numbers available, and without me repeating it again, is that evaluation report at the end of the year will have that full information. But if the committee so wishes, I'll be happy to provide the in-year information specifically around taxi card schemes to all members by email after I work with colleagues within transport to get it in the coming weeks. So happy to provide that to members once I get it.
Yeah, we're happy to do that with that response, Kim?
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
So we just send out information. Obviously, we'll get more information back at the turn of the financial year, and we'll get on all these projects. Anybody else want to come in these items? No. We'll move on to the next one, which is Appendix 1, Fishing Galloway Council Advice and Information Service Commission. So, any questions on that one? No. Page 57, Local Child Poverty Action Report. This report provides a status update on their child poverty action 2022 to 26. And there's, on page 58, stop me if you want to come in, 58. Councillor Jimison.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. There's a lot of stuff in here, obviously. I'm going to talk about, first of all, I'm a bit surprised that this has got a green tick. The green tick means that it's complete. Build upon opportunities in literacy, numeracy, health and wellbeing designed to close the poverty gap. And at the latest note, we've got 2 bullet points here. Ensure that every child and young person achieves the highest standard of literacy and numeracy, as well as the knowledge and skills necessary to shape the future of the successful learners, confident individuals, blah. Ensuring every child and young person has the same opportunity to succeed, no matter their background or shared protected characteristics, with a particular focus on closing the poverty-related attainment gap. Now, well, I suppose we could justify build upon, which you've built upon, but the outcomes in literacy and numeracy from our schools are really, don't compare favourably with other councils, to put it politely. We're not getting equity at all. The difference between schools and within schools is quite huge. This is not just down to education, it's down to social services, how well they work together, the NHS and the local employability partnership. But to say that this is complete is utter nonsense, and I really challenge that. There's a screed of stuff that the education people are doing along with others, and I quite agree that some of these are in 2000, 2004, the training, etc., etc. But the other challenge, you can train people, but if we don't have the resources, we can't close the attainment gap. And I'm not going to get into the budget, because these are just proposals from the officers. But the challenge on ASN, for example, is huge. So we're not closing the attainment gap in literacy and numeracy, and that will affect young people going forward in education and employment. So I challenge that this is, the status is a green tick. Well, and I really challenge that we're not addressing the situation adequately through lack of resources and lack of coordination, which this group has been set up to challenge and support.
Okay, thanks for that. Obviously, the struggle to and challenge to improve literacy and numeracy goes on. It's never complete. So, but I'm sure there'll be a different interpretation of what that tick means from Darren.
Sticky button there, my apologies. Thank you, Chair. So, in terms of, I think it's important to reflect that this local child poverty action report, of course, represents work that is going on across the council, which has separate planning, reporting and governance structures. So this specific action in the context of the local child poverty action report was to build upon opportunities, and the reason it's been indicated as complete with a due date of March 2024 was in relation to the activities that have been detailed. I take the point in terms of where we're at. I think that how we move that forward sits firmly within the education improvement plan and the annual report, which we have that opportunity. We had that opportunity to consider earlier this year, and we of course will do so moving forward. So, in terms of the local child poverty action report, I would consider that action specifically addressed in terms of that broader work. Absolutely, there's much work to be done, but I think that should be taken forward through that particular committee and through that plan. Thank you.
Councillor Jimison.
Yeah, I can respond to that without delaying the meeting much longer. Surely it would have been more honest to say in progress on schedule, which is the second on that list. For me, I'm bringing it up because it's particularly sensitive to me, but for me, a green tick looks great stuff, well done, and that's delusionary, I would say. I'll just follow up by saying it's not just down to education, the education plan sets out a lot of ambitions. It's set up a lot of working groups, but there's the proof will be in the pudding, but it's also affected by social work and all the other agencies. And again, I can't emphasize enough the need for collaboration, genuine collaboration, proactive collaboration, rather than reacting to historic reports. We must react to, but we just talked about, we heard the children saying the stigma about being poor in school. That impacts on numeracy and literacy hugely, so it's not just a job for education, it's a job for this subgroup to challenge all the people that are involved to make a difference.
Thanks for your point, Councillor Jimison. Obviously, the actions just build upon the opportunities, and I think we have achieved that goal building. We've got a long way to go because we're just really at the foundations. Councillor Ferguson, you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I suppose, I think George kind of touched on it a wee bit there, but I think it would probably be better if you look at the grid on page 57 about the status of the actions. In progress on schedule would be a lot more appropriate for a considerable amount, especially the ones that are due to finish till 26. And I said I'm hoping that's just a wee administrative error there, because but it doesn't look right. It could be a green triangle pointing to the right, in progress on schedule. So we don't know whether it's on schedule, or it's not on schedule, if it's not even started. So I think if Darren can upgrade this or update this, or whoever's responsible for it, just to reflect the correct situation, that would be really helpful. Yeah. And just one last thing, if I could, I just wish we'd stop talking about children in this committee. This is for everybody, older people as well, middle-aged people, working people, anybody who's suffering from some form of poverty. So, whilst you can't knock the comments about any specific age group, we should really be looking at everybody here, and it's quite worrying here. I've not heard anybody talking about any older people here yet. But that'll come. Rant over. Sorry, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Want to go on? Stephen?
Yeah, Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Jimison as well, in terms of the green tick, this is partly to do with the system that we use to record things. So the specific actions that were agreed have been completed, hence the green tick. If we said it was in progress, the overall objective to close the literacy gap is ongoing, absolutely, but that's not what this specific element's about. So the actions that were agreed as part of the child poverty action plan have been completed, hence the green tick. It can be a little bit confusing when this is in isolation as opposed to the whole picture. If we marked it as in progress, then that would suggest that the actions that staff and other colleagues have completed haven't been. So we get this in a number of committees when it comes to the system of reporting. So that isn't an administrative error, it's a factual position in terms of the specific actions that were agreed to build upon opportunities have been completed, but it doesn't mean the work isn't ongoing. And in terms of the latest note that's alongside that, the 2 bullet points with the wording in italics shows what needs to be done. We need to continue this, and then it will actually be picked up in the education improvement plan, and the broader topic will be addressed there. So I just wanted to make that clear that sometimes the system that we use doesn't always reflect the overall picture, but the specific actions that sit below have been completed.
Councillor Ferguson.
No, I don't accept that. If that's the system we've got, that system needs to change, because that system should reflect the true position rather than putting in 1 or 2 keywords and it comes up as a green tick. And for me, it's the finishing of a project where the green tick should come in, where the project is actually complete, not just we've ticked 1 or 2 buzzwords that make it green, a green tick. If that's the system we've got, then we need to look at that system and actually do something about that. And I would suggest that's a much wider issue than this committee, and maybe something that needs to go back in through the leaders panel or somewhere for them to investigate. Because how on earth are we supposed to honestly interrogate or scrutinise, whatever you want to call it, if officers are acting in good faith, putting in a report or putting some entry in, and it automatically ticks green when they know it's not complete, but it's complete because of the anomalies of the system we're using. As elected members, are we happy with that system? I, for one, am, and I'm just looking at maybe Gail can maybe take that forward to the leaders panel. I'm not sure how you would take that forward.
That's food for thought there. We're going to agree on the action plan for next year, but after this, so we consider that. We're going on from item 4 was, and that is income from employment, which is page 58 to page 64, and there's 10 priority actions there. Does anybody want to come in on those 10 priority actions? And page 65, the cost of living support, has got a number of actions as well, which takes you through to the next item, next heading, which is going through right to page 77. Down. Yeah.
Page 67, number 14, refers to school build on existing action, which identifies the need for and distributes free IT equipment that enables internet access for low-income families. It's a green tick again, but it's the lack of IT equipment in poor families is a must-do, and it's not being done. I used the word, I'm going to back up Andy Ferguson, I used the word previously in another committee about candour. And if you're scanning these, as members do, when you're reading a lot of stuff, you see a green tick, you think that's okay. I want qualification in that. If you're going to have a wee green tick, I want to see where we are. Where we are in literacy and numeracy is really pretty poor. There's no indication of that. It gives us a false sense of security. We see a green tick, it's all about blah, blah, blah. Literacy and numeracy, oh, that's okay. So we need more candour in these things, so that there's almost putting too positive a spin on things that are really serious. And in Dumfries and Galloway, in the local benchmarking, local authority, local benchmarking, we're way down the league table, and yet we've got a green tick against numeracy and literacy. It's confusing, to say the least, but I would say it's also disingenuous. Particularly on page 67, sorry, Richard, we're nowhere near getting enough IT equipment into schools. Now, I know the Scottish Government had a commitment to that, and that funding was withdrawn, but I've done my research on this. Other local authorities have got an iPad for every single child in their school. And we do not have that. We don't even have it for poor children. So how are we going to close the attainment gap for children and, as Andy Ferguson quite rightly says, adults that are in poverty? How can an adult in poverty improve the literacy and numeracy if we don't have the wherewithal or the agency to get that? You know, I'm just looking for candour, and I'm not being critical of all the work you guys are doing, but if we as members are going to drive policy, we need to be honest with each other. Not honest, the wrong word, open.
Councillor, I'll be open and say that, well, it was a fantastic aspiration of the Scottish Government that they would provide funding for equipment for all our children at school, and they're working towards that, but obviously they're constrained with resources. Councillor McGregor, you want to come in?
No, not
Stephen?
In relation to the action point number 14 here, we have given 3,080 devices to children. The criteria was free school meals, as is stated. We also worked with those families to see how many of them didn't have access to Wi-Fi. And what we're seeing was 161 families didn't, so we did distribute SIM cards so that those families could have Wi-Fi at home. So in terms of the project, you know, we did identify 3,080 children and young people. We did give the equipment. And for 161 of those who didn't have Wi-Fi, we also give SIM cards so that they would have access in a way. So that was completed. However, the situation will rapidly change. Some of that equipment will break, will be lost. Some people sell it, if we're being honest. You know, I'm looking at Mark, we have a couple of examples of that. And I'm not being critical of that, because if you can sell a device for 80 quid to buy some food, you will. So it's what do we do on a continuous basis? So again, in terms of the project at the time to give everybody a piece of equipment access to Wi-Fi, that was completed. It's what do we do on a continuous basis to ensure that's the case. So I would argue that it's not disingenuous. We did really well there. We got all of those laptops and iPads into those family homes who accessed free school meals, and we gave 161 SIM cards to get Wi-Fi access where it was identified it wasn't. So I think we should acknowledge that this is a really difficult subject, but I think to criticise staff who are doing their absolute best in getting equipment into homes and Wi-Fi, that should also be celebrated. We have actually achieved that, and it therefore should be a green tick. But we're not naive to think that that's going to be the constant position, because of a one-off piece of work. And staff are doing, follow-ups, and Councillor McGregor's already mentioned that we need to ensure, or you as a council need to ensure that that can happen as we move forward in the future.
No criticism of staff, absolutely none.
I think we're considering on poverty reduction issues, not on the educational attainment, but which is subject of another committee. The cost of living support goes from 65 right through to 784. And Councillor Stevenson wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 65, the action of the SHIP, and it says, over the last 5 years, a total of 846 affordable homes have been created via the SHIP. It doesn't actually say how many homes have been in an unsuitable condition, or people have been unable to live in. I know in my ward we've had quite a few flats knocked down that were just not fit for purpose at all. So I suppose it makes it difficult to say how many homes have actually been built in total when you take away the homes that have been knocked down in the first place, to see if we're standing still or whether we're actually moving forward with that. Thank you.
Happy to take that on board, and in terms of future reporting we can look to reflect some additional information to add that context.
What is there specific information you'd like now to pass on to you?
Not just now, no. Like I say, it's just when you see that, it looks great, but it doesn't actually tell you how many homes aren't fit for purpose and how far we've moved on from that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll take that on board. Okay. Okay, anyone want to come in 65 to 84? Or on income from benefits, which is 6, which is page 85 to 86, and other actions on page 87 to 89 and 90. Yeah. Any other points you want to do in that on that section? No. Let's move on then. Case studies, page 91. 91 gives you an indication of the work that's been done by our officers to help people in poverty. Happy to note those. A good indication of what that's going on. And the final thing is we've got to look at the plan for the coming year 2024 to 26. And it's from page 102 onwards. Now, do you want to comment on how this follows on from last year, Mark, or how does it follow on from Mark, Darren? How does it follow on from what we've just discussed?
Thank you, Chair. So Earlier this year and last year, we've been working with Public Health Scotland, with partners, with other stakeholders. We've been taking account of the views of our children, young people, of parents and carers through a variety of engagement. And what we've come up with is that moving forward, we need to be really focused. We need to really think carefully about what we're doing around mitigation, but also picking up on the points that have been made today. We know that we need to focus on that prevention, that making that long-term difference. So, as you'll know, many of the actions that are reflected, that were agreed in 2022, have really, things have moved on, they've been superseded. So the action plan in front of you seeks to bring about a refreshed plan that allows us to have some really meaningful areas of focus over the next 2 years, while also taking account of the various other activity that's been progressed out with the scope of this particular action plan, which I think some of the areas that we've touched on today, I think they're already being taken care of elsewhere, and so we've not included them as a focus in these actions. We've really tried to make sure there's a distinction between what we're doing through this vehicle, through subgroup 4 of the Poverty and Inequalities Partnership, and what we're driving forward elsewhere. Thank you.
So any questions or points on the draft action plan, which we have to agree today, or change if we want? But anybody else want to come in? No? Well, I think we've had a good debate today, so we can go to the recommendations on it. 1, to consider the background requirements of the local child poverty action group as set out at paragraphs 4.1 to 4.8. We're happy that we consider that. Scrutinise and agree the Dumfries and Galloway Local Child Poverty Action Report 2023-24 as detailed in Appendix 1, and Action Plan 2024-26 as detailed in Appendix 2, noting the key supporting activities set out in paragraph 4.9 and the next steps as set out paragraph. So happy with it, scrutinised and agreed? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So item 6, any other business deemed urgent by the chair due to the need for decision. I have not been notified of any urgent business. And thank you very much for your attendance, and the next meeting date is the Thursday the 30th of January. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.